Hello everyone, I'm Swanand Dharmadhikari. I'm from AR Platform Support team. I'm working on legacy versions and now focused on Helix Innovation Suite on-prem deployment from the support standpoint. I've been working in this particular team for more than 10 years. In this particular session, we are going to talk about Helix Innovation Suite on-prem deployment pipeline troubleshooting. Let's get started. So, in this webinar, we will walk you through the installation process used in Helix Innovation Suite on-prem versions. As you all know, this is a containerized deployment approach as opposed to earlier installation approach. Hence, we will also walk you through the pipeline details which are required for Helix Innovation Suite on-prems. Along with that, once your pipeline configuration is ready, we will also walk you through the troubleshooting examples. There are certainly 4 to 5 troubleshooting examples, unique examples we have captured that will help you understand what logs that you need to gather, what information that you can check if any of the errors which gets familiar to you or it may get into your deployment activities. So this session will help you to understand how to troubleshoot that Jenkins pipeline if you face any such issues during the deployment. We will cover what logs you can check, what details you can check in the summary section. And further, if any assistance is required from BMC support side, what information you can share while logging a case with BMC. That will help support team to expedite the resolution. We will also discuss about the references that will help you with more details, common errors, and the resolutions. Let's get started with the installation process. So as you all know, the biggest change from prior version is the move from server-based installation model to the containers. This is a complex landscape to account for all the desired deployment options. So this particular architecture or this particular deployment process currently is trending after years of global trending towards greater public cloud adoption. There are new dynamics which are changing cloud economics. So in this, from BMC standpoint, you can deploy to any of the available cloud services. You can use BMC Helix Cloud, you can use BMC on-premises, you can use it on the private cloud, you can use any of the public cloud as well. So the public cloud offerings are just like Google Kubernetes, then Azure Kubernetes, and also the Elastic Kubernetes, which is Amazon. So basically, there may be a question that why BMC designed the new Helix platform using a very latest containerized technology. So basically, the utilization is faster solution deployment, better resource management. There are actually many advantages to this containerizing Helix deployment. As containers are portable, everything that application needs to run is encapsulated in a container. And it's very easy for any of the configuration and the library dependencies, make it very easy to deploy and eliminate any chances of environmental inconsistencies. Containers are very lightweight. This makes them very quicker to start and stop. Containerization also allows you for auto scaling. If a container orchestration engine can monitor your services, automatically scale up, scale down the servers as per the need, and automating the right size of the environment will help to manage the required resources and the associated costs. And containerization also allows you for easy upgrades, which gives you a zero downtime. And that allows this deployment, complete process of entire this deployment happens through Jenkins pipeline. Hence, it is necessary to understand what inputs you share and the methods to troubleshoot the pipeline issues. If anything fails, you want to know what information you need to gather or what information you need to check. So, as a prerequisites for installation process overview, BMC Helix Innovation Suite applications get deployed through Jenkins pipeline. BMC provides Jenkins pipeline to install Helix IT Service Management on your on-premise systems. To get started with this installation process, it is best to understand what is the end-to-end process for implementing BMC Helix IT Service Management on your system. So actually this includes details to set up your system, to meet system requirements, downloading installation files, performing the installation, and the system configurations further. So from BMC standpoint, if you possess any of this prerequisite recommended skills, or added advantage if you have a knowledge on the tools which are required for this deployment, that generally helps. So those tools are just like a Jenkins, Ansible, Helm, Git, kubectl, Docker, and also a Linux, an Nginx ingress controller. This containerization is heavily dependent on Linux operating system, and Linux operating system is used in Jenkins server setup as well, and the shell scripts that are used to set the deployment pipeline. So if you have a good hands-on knowledge on the Linux, and if you are also aware of all the recommended tools like Jenkins, Ansible, Helm, Git, it gives you a better hand while troubleshooting any of the use cases. So this involved, and I can't cover everything just in a single webinar. So before getting into the details of troubleshooting, let me first highlight related topics. So we expect you have performed the platform deployment, also the configured the RSSO realms as per the documentation which BMC has shared. We also expect that you have access to your Kubernetes OpenShift cluster that will help you to access pod, get some details wherever it is required. And no specific prerequisites are there apart from the ones which we just talked about for the deployments like Kubernetes, Jenkins, and all. In the upcoming slides, we will try to see the components like what Jenkins pipeline deploy to your cluster, because there are multiple pipelines which you will see when you land up into the Jenkins homepage, and you will see a lot of different pipelines which to check, which to work with. We will walk through in the upcoming slides. So as we know, for the installation, you need to set up your deployment engine, which is very much easiest task, but it needs to be done for the Jenkins setup. So this deployment engine is deployment tool that is used to deploy, upgrade, then patch and manage your configurations of BMC Helix Innovation Suite in your environment. It is a logical entity that uses tools such as Jenkins, Ansible to deploy BMC application workloads. At a high level, you use this BMC deployment engine to perform the following task, just like it is doing a lot of installations which are related to the Helix Innovation Suite on-prem deployment. So moving to the next one. So once you land up into the Helix, once you're done rather with installation of deployment engine, you run the deployment engine Perl script. This is what a page will appear in front of you. Now, as you can see over here, it is showing a lot of different pipelines for us. BMC Helix configure ITSM, generate config, interops, many of them. We will talk through it in a bit. So once you land into this particular page at the very first time, this page will not be errored out. Just like you can see, there are some red symbols or red icons showing across, which indicates something is went wrong. So at the first place, you will not see any such details on your screen. So ITSM or Helix Innovation Suite ITSM installation uses Jenkins, which provides a GUI interface as opposed to the text, a command line interface. And it is totally different from your legacy versions in which you used to get the installers and you can just click and share the information. As you can see, there are series of stages called as pipelines which run sequentially to deploy the products. The Helix Innovation Suite on-prem deployment, or the Helix on-prem deployment pipeline, is the one which is also known as the Uber pipeline. And this is the pipeline where the customer specific input values are provided. So this is the very important when you try to perform any of the installation. This pipeline calls the other deploy the various ITSM components. If correctly configured this particular pipeline, your installation will through successfully. Let's check the other one. The Helix platform deploy. The Helix platform deploy is the pipeline which deploys your multiple different pods, just like your platform FTS, platform integration, platform users. However, if you're trying to deploy a compact size or the small size deployment, you will just only see platform FTS in the compact, and in the small, you will not see any of the platform int or user pods. There is a platform SR pod which is representing smart reporting. So if in case you have already enabled the support extension for smart reporting, you can deploy the smart reporting and you will see this particular pod. So this particular pods are basically representing the BMC Helix Innovation Suite server that comprises of your email engine, approval server, assignment engine, everything. It will also include your BMC Helix CMDB, your Atrium integrator, then your Helix ITSM complete suite like service desk, change management, asset management, service request management application. This also comprises of your mid-tier, your users, your Atrium web services. Moving to the next one, that is a non-platform deploy. Smart IT chat like OpenFire, virtual chat plugin, virtual chat server. So these are the components which gets deployed through the non-platform deploy. Moving to the next one, which is your smart apps. So the smart apps deployment is basically the DWP Tomcat master slave, your catalog ITSM plugin, and it also deploys the components like your digital workplace catalog, work business workflows, multi-cloud broker, ITSM insights. The next pipeline which is available in the system is interops. So interops activates BMC Helix ITSM insights and BMC Helix Innovation Suite services for the BMC Helix platform tenant, so that all the services can be used through the single URL, which is your Helix portal URL. So all the applications, you can use it through the single URL. And the next one is smart reporting. So as I said earlier, if you have support extension for the smart reporting activated, then you can deploy smart reporting and it will do the same work as it used to do in the legacy setups of doing the reporting, the smart reporting. The last one is about the support assistant tool. So as its name suggests, it's a assistant tool which helps you out to gather the logs, access the containers, if in case you would like to get some of the logs from different containers, just like we discussed right earlier. Moving to the next one. So the pipeline details for the Helix Innovation Suite on-prem. So from the pipeline, as you can see, there are various types of inputs you will need to insert in your Helix on-prem deployment, which is Uber pipeline, just like your customer name, the customer service, your ingress, then your innovation suite namespace. Along with that, the product deploy section. In the product deploy section, you will see a lot of products. There may come a question indicating that you just have selected or you just have in the legacy setups, you just have a single application and then all the custom applications are using, and do I still need to go on with this particular specific deployment? So the answer is that we currently support all or you can say the complete Helix Innovation Suite deployment. So we request you to select the required deployment categories when you try to select the product deployments. Along with that, we also need to provide the database credentials, where to connect to the database from the cluster, your DB details. Along with that, your platform installation details. As we mentioned earlier, it is prerequisite that you should have your platform services to be deployed, which lets you or which enables you with the RSSO inputs, because those are also required while you try to perform this installation. It also then asks you to provide the repos which you have downloaded from the BMC electronic product download websites. So where are all those particular files that I've stored? You will just need to share this particular locations. So customer specific values as well as the credentials, the RSS or URL, because that's how the users and the authentication will work while performing this deployment further. So planning is always a key to success, and the previously mentioned checklist will help you make sure you have all the required values. Having said that, even if anything goes wrong, don't worry. It's not that it's end over here that you will just be in the problem. So we do have a mechanism to identify if whatever the values that you've entered are correct or not. Let's check into that. So now you reach to the stage that you have set up your deployment engine, you got your pipelines, you dry run these particular pipelines, because that is very much important. If you miss to dry run, it will just not initialize the parameters which are required for the pipeline to run. So if you have done that and you've also entered all your input configuration parameters in Helix on-prem deployment pipeline, which is the Uber pipeline, once these details are there, then you just need to validate before you can actually proceed with the installation. So there is this health check tool for a pipeline is available. What it does is, it is important to validate your configuration. So once you have the configuration ready, you can run this health check tool to validate all the input configuration. The changes to the Uber pipeline Jenkins files may be made at any time before or after the pipeline has been run, and it will be effective from the next use. The assumption what we need, or this health check tool needs, is that it has run at least one as a dry run. So what the health check tool does, as I mentioned, so health check tool generates the HTML text output for the validations, and if it fails, it will give you the report in the text as well as the HTML format. You can just validate, just check the errors, correct those out, and once you have figured out all the errors, taken the corrective actions, you can rerun it for the last time, ensure it gives you the system is ready for installation and every check has been passed and there is no error. Once you get this message, you can then proceed with further deployment on your setup. So to get more understanding, you can go through this Helix health check tool for the pipelines. So now your health check is passed successfully, everything is looking good. What to do in that particular situation? So you have running the pipeline, you can try to monitor your progress through the console output. If in case you're well aware of what the system is doing, how this background functionalities work with the kubectl, git, many of the other commands. If you're fine and if you're confident to read through this output, you can use this. If you're not much interested about what system is doing, you just need to understand how many stages this particular installation has reached to, you can use then the graphical representation. This graphical representation, as you can see, it gives you a different stages about which component system is trying to deploy, which component system is currently trying to deploy, and what are the further stages in this particular pipeline. Like as you can see over here, create a workspace, pre-setup, get the Helm charts, create templates. So this is basically during one specific pipeline deployment, you will see this different stages. At the top, at the backdrop of your screen, you can see a different application, just like Helix Remedy platform is one application that denoted by one particular pipeline, then Helix Remedy Smart Reporting, again represented by another pipeline. So you can see which all components system has already deployed. And you can try to take further actions or call by checking these inputs. If in case, let's say your pipeline is running smooth, it has deployed your Helix Remedy platform, but later while deploying Helix Remedy Smart Reporting or any of the other components, it has failed. So you can see this on the staged view, a graphical representation. It will be highlighted in this red box. Once you hover your mouse on that red box, a pop-up will appear, just like it will show you the logs. And if you click, you will get that particular snippet, why it has failed. If you're experienced enough in this domain, then you can easily figure it out. If not, you can always get the console output to understand what is going wrong in this particular deployment. Now let us check further. with the troubleshooting example demos. So here are those 5 selected demos that we have captured. Let us walk through on this particular demos. Now, as you can see, this particular pipeline, which is Helix on-prem deployment, is failing. This is failing on Helix Remedy platform. Now let's look into the console output log. So once you will see the console output, it will definitely throw the failure error. Now let's try to see which is the pipeline which was executing, which resulted into the failure. As you can see, Helix platform deploy is the pipeline which has failed. Now let's try to see the console output to understand why it has failed. So when you'll open the Helix platform deploy, straight away go to the bottom of this particular console output. As you can see, the end result is failure. Now let's try to see the event which has failed or which has caused this particular pipeline to fail. The general method we follow is just selecting a failure equals to 1. So I'll just search it with the keyword failed equals to 1. So now, as you can see, this is the event on which this particular pipeline has failed. Now, if you will just scroll up, you will try to understand, you will try to get the details, and that will help you understand what is the problem. So it is trying to set up some database, and while setting up the database, the credentials which are given for the database connection, just like Postgres as the user, which is a super user, and the password authentication has failed for this particular user. Now to correct this particular problem, let us go back to the Helix on-prem deployment pipeline. Let us try to rebuild this respective pipeline. I'll just click on the last one. I'll click on a rebuild. So now let's jump to the parameters related to the database inputs. So as you can see, for the database admin user is Postgres. The problem is with the password. Let's try to change the password. Let's try to enter a correct password for this user. Always remember, whenever you will be rebuilding any of the pipeline, especially the Helix on-prem deployment pipeline, it requires you to provide the CSRT file. If you fail to give the file in any specific run, the pipelines will fail again. So please ensure whenever you will be rebuilding, always provide a CSRT file before you click on the rebuild. Now, as we have corrected the value and we have given the CSRT file, let's rebuild this particular pipeline. Now, as you can see, as we have rebuilt the pipeline, let's look into the console output for this particular pipeline run. So now it has completed the generate config. It has progressed further for the Helix platform deploy, where we have made the changes for the database and where the previous failure was. Now let's look into the console output for the Helix platform deploy. When you look into the Helix platform deploy, the earlier failure was at the database level. Now when we searched it with the database underscore, this was the situation when it was failing it earlier, as we have given the wrong password for the Postgres user. Now as you can see, the granting role for the AR admin user, creating of the database is successfully completed, and further while creating a database. So it is performing its further activities in the pipe. So it is performing its further activities in the pipeline. Now let us look into the second demo example, which is related to the pod failing to start due to issues with image pool. As you can now see that Helix on-prem deployment pipeline is performing a deployment of Helix Remedy Smart Reporting. This is for the customers who have support extension enabled for the smart reporting. Now when I go and open the console output for this particular pipeline, which is present over here. So for the Helix on-prem deployment pipeline, it is performing Helix Smart Reporting deploy. When I see the console output for the Helix Smart Reporting deploy, you can see that it is trying to perform an activity of SRDB setup job container. So now it has been a while that it is trying to set up SRDB setup. So let's check it with the help of respective container. So what I tried to did is I just tried to run the command kubectl get pods with sub particular namespace. So support blue is my Helix Innovation Suite ITSM namespace. So when you will see this, you can see that SRDB setup is failing. It is giving the error image pulled back off. So if in case any such error is visible when you try to get a pods for a specific namespace, you can just try to run the command again kubectl, just try to see whether it is still giving the same error. Now as you can see, it is giving the same error. So let's try to get the descriptive pod. So as you can see over here in the events, it says that pulling the image harbor from the harbor, it is failing to pull this respective image. The RPC code unknown error. So it indicates system is failing to pull this particular image which is required for this particular pod to get started. So what we can try to do in this particular situation is we can try to manually pull this respective image if available using just like Docker login and then Docker pull. Now as you can see, I'm trying to run Helix on-prem deployment pipeline and it has failed with the generate input configuration files. Now let's look into the logs for this particular pipeline. When we check in this particular log, it has reached to the point of performing Helix generate config deployment, and as you can see this Helix generate config deployment has completed successfully. However, going further down the line, we can see this particular pipeline, instead of going further for platform deployment, it has failed. While checking further in this particular pipeline console output log, we can see this error, scripts not permitted to use method. And as you can see over here, administrators can decide whether to approve or reject this particular signature. If in case you happen to come across such situations in which you need to approve or reject any signature, just click on this particular link. I prefer to use in a new tab. When you will see, it requires your approval for approving any specific request. Now this will be repeated couple of times. You will just need to approve it, and then once you click on approve, you can just go back and rebuild this particular pipeline. Now as rebuild, as we have said earlier as well, you will just need to give the correct CS search file for this particular pipeline to run. And once you rebuild, it will proceed further and it will again ask you for performing this approval. And again, you can just click on approve and your pipelines will proceed further. Now, in this scenario of troubleshooting a pipeline deployment issues, when the pod is failing to start, there are various reasons due to which a pod can fail to start. However, in this particular scenario, we will see one of that particular use case which causes a platform FTS pod is not able to start. One of the reason here is a wrong certificate being used other than the CSRT file which BMC recommends. As you can see over here in this current pipeline, this particular pipeline is performing remedy platform deploy. Now further, when we go to the remedy platform deploy console output, it says that this particular pipeline is waiting for a platform SR to be up. Now it indicates that this particular pipeline is just waiting. We don't know why it is waiting. So let's get inside the particular cluster. Let's run the commands. As you can see, I've run the command kubectl get pods for that particular namespace. It says platform FTS, 2 of the 3 containers are running and it is not completely up. So one of the container is failing to start. Now let's try to run the same command again. Kubectl get pod for that particular namespace. As you can see, it still shows 2 out of 3 is running. It's been 41 minutes since this particular pod is trying to start up. It's quite a long time compared to the normal service startup of a Remedy AR server service. It generally takes around average 10 minutes to start this particular process. And after that, we should see this particular platform FTS to be up and running. Now, to get some more details, we can try to describe this particular pod to see whether we can get some more details out of it. So when I just describe this particular pod, you can see that it is trying to deploy multiple things. These are basically the config parameters which are available for this particular image. So once you go further down the line, you can see this is the warning unhealthy state, and it indicates that the readiness probe is failed for this particular pod. Now it indicates the readiness probe is failed, but it doesn't tell us that what has caused for this particular pod from starting up. So now let's try to get the logs for this particular pod. Let me just try to get the pod name as is. Now, as it says, you will need to put some containers. So you can use -c platform as it's running through the platform container. So now, as you can see, in this particular startup, there are a lot of 90 errors, communication errors, as we know that a remedy service is failing to start. Now let's try to see it earlier, that why exactly it has failed to start. Now let's try to go up in the order just to see what is happening. So as you can see over here, they are giving some kind of errors which are related to could not create the default SSL context. Further, in this particular communication, just to get some more details, we can see that constructed through an exception, nested exception, is could not create the default SSL context. So as you can see, this error is repeating. If you will just scroll up or scroll down, it is just calling some trust store issues or issues related to the cert that you have used. Even if we will scroll up further in this particular log output, we will see the same error repeating again and again. So this indicates me there is some wrong thing or something wrong with respect to the certificate that I've used. Now, as the pipeline is running, we can just go back to the pipeline. We can try to see the parameters. So what I did is I've just been to this particular pipeline. I've just clicked on the parameters. So when I just go up to the certificate where we have applied the certificate, let us see. So as you can see, CS certs file, the provided CSH file is over here. Now over here, instead of using CSH file as it is recommended, I have used this digicert global CSCert CRT file. So as our documentation says for the CSCert file, it says click browse and upload your custom CSCert file. Any other file apart from CSCert file will lead to the errors as we are seeing in this particular situation, like invalid key store format. It will tell us about problem accessing the trust store. So to correct it out, we just need to create or we'll need to generate the correct CSH file based with this particular steps. Now to get a particular CS search file, you will have to come to applying security certificates page, and as you can see, download a CS search file. Once you click over here, it will redirect you to download this particular file. Once the CS search is available, you will just need to run this particular key tool commands, and the keys which are available or the certificates which are available with you, you will just need to provide that particular inputs. Once you run that, your certificate will be inserted into the CS search file, and then this CS search file you will need to apply in the CS search file option of your pipeline. Build of this particular pipeline, you can upload the correct CS search file which is available with you. Once you apply that, your pipeline will get through. As you can see, this Helix on-prem deployment pipeline stage view, it is failing on Helix interrupts pipeline. Now, let us further check in the console output for this Helix interrupts pipeline. Simple way I always prefer is checking the Helix on-prem deployment, and from there just open the build which has failed. So this is the Helix on-prem deployment pipeline failure attempt. So as we have seen earlier, as we have discussed as well, let's try to look into the events which are equal to which are failed equal to 1. That generally tells us which is the failed attempt. But as I see this failed equal to 1, try to search it, I don't see any event recorded where there is a failure captured. But when you go to the bottom of this particular pipeline console output, it indicates it has failed. It has failed with some exception, Hudson abort exception. It doesn't give us a clue like why it has failed. Now, there are certain situations in which you may not see the events which are failed equal to 1, but still the pipeline will fail. To understand and to get further when this particular pipeline is failing where there are no events recorded as such. So going further, this particular Helix ITSM interrupts pipeline, we will have to check about what this particular pipeline does. So Helix interrupts pipeline activates the BMC Helix ITSM Insights and BMC Helix Innovation Suite services for the BMC Helix platform tenant so that the services can be used through BMC Helix portal. So we'll need to check for the tenant activation and the login in this particular pipeline logs. Now let's try to start from this top section. Now let's move further. Going down, we will see some activities getting recorded with the TCTL commands. Moving down this line, you can see some TCTL get tenant activities are getting performed for this particular container. Now, with the TCTL get tenant, we can see there is one response from the utility that yes, this particular blue is the name of this particular for this particular platform, and its environment and its ID and status is active, which is very much important. And the domain. Going further down the line, when we say there is this tenant ID, this tenant ID value, when system is trying to record, it is displaying it as a blank. However, this particular tenant ID, as we can see from the above top command, it is returning it back a value. So now that is something a catch. Why the tenant ID is failing? Now to move further, just to understand whether if this is just only a challenge in this particular pipeline build or there are any other challenges. Going down further, the TCTL update tenant and all the other activities will get through as it's in the sequence. So now here TCTL is trying to list down all the services associated with that particular tenant ID. Now in the smooth run or in the successful run pipeline, you will see a lot of services which are just like your ITSM services. For example, take a look into other pipeline which was built successfully. So in this, you can see there are a lot of services reported. That tells us that something is wrong. Something is not mapped correctly in this particular failed run. So going further, system is again trying to run this, get the output for the TCTL config, but it is not getting the value. Moving further down the line, if you will see, there are some TCTL update tenant activities are going on, but as we do not have the tenant ID earlier returned successfully, that has resulted in the problem. The reason being, when you will see this grep command, it is trying to grep it to the value which is cluster value. So now that tells us something is wrong with the configuration parameter which have been used for this particular configuration. Now let us look into the parameters which are used for this particular deployment. So when we'll go to the parameter section, in the parameters Helix platform deploy, we can see the platform namespace, platform domain, and here it comes the Helix platform customer name. So now the customer name is the value which you have used in your infra config value, which is a company name value. So now this particular value has been used as a domain, cluster value, not even a domain, it's a cluster value that has been used. And this is the reason why the current pipeline has failed. Now we will have to just correct this particular value using the rebuild command. Let us rebuild, change this particular value back to the company value which we have used then, that is blue. And as we keep on saying, just don't forget to apply CSRts file. Let's deploy the CSRts. Now I applied the CSRts file and let me just rebuild this particular pipeline. So once you rebuild, if this is just only the error, your pipeline will go through further. Thank you. Now, we have covered a lot, and I thank you for your time and attention. Now, I want to quickly recap the high points to remember. You can check from the pipeline stage view as mentioned to understand which pipeline is failing. You can always check the console output of Helix on-prem deployment pipeline. Once you get to the failed pipeline, you will see from the console output which is the failed pipeline or the last executed pipeline. You can see through the console output of that last particular pipeline. And from that, once you get to that particular failed pipeline, check the console output for the pipeline, search or find where the failure is. You can use keyword like failed equal to 1, as we have seen the demos. Now, not all errored events can be just failures. Some of them are just validation check by pipeline scripts. And if there is any fatal error, pipeline is progressing or indicates the validation has failed and pipeline deployment is missing component. You can check it through that particular console output. Once you get the failed event or a command, check if that is related to a pod or any other event. You can also try to describe a specific pod if you see there is a pod specific issue or a pod specific problem. Check the events in the pod describe output to understand what is causing this issue for a specific pod. That particular event may give you some additional details or it may not help. If none of these details help you out, you can further try getting the pod logs for the failing pod. Pod logs will certainly help you out with additional details that may give you a path or the way out in troubleshooting this issue further. If you get a problem, you can proceed with corrective actions and rebuild the pipeline and proceed further. And as always, if you need assistance, feel free to log a support case with BMC with all the necessary details as mentioned earlier. We will always support you. Now, as promised, here are the references where you can find more details on this topic. The best FAQ listed first are how to support, share common questions, solutions to them. So if there is some new common issue that pops up next month, we try to get this updated so anyone exploring the topic can find what support uses and recommends most. I've also tried to include links, doc, and community posts that are particularly helpful in my experience and my journey. Once again, thank you for your time, and I hope it has been helpful. Thank you.